I played with Darrelle Revis my rookie year. He was playing cover 2 on the backside. It was a clean as day cover 2 look. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to just drop back, stare the front side down, and rip this in cut over the Will's head. Drop back, playing out perfect in my brain. I turn, I throw the ball, and like Reeve is playing 2-man trail tech underneath him and picked it off. He goes, listen, bro, it was 3-by-1. The kid took this release. That's the transition. You got guys like that. You got guys like Ed Reed, like what's played by the book and what's coached at the college level, and guys are like, oh, like quarters, I got to be here and I got to, here to here and do this. Like they're not. They're so instinctual. They're pros. That's what I think is so spectacular about the whole thing, is that never had a losing season in that entire stretch. Just being able to do it at a place like that and then reap the benefits as a letterman and alumni now, and guys like you now coming out, like the character of guys hasn't changed. The drive of guys haven't changed, and the seismic drop that everyone expected from the program never happened. Right. And not just me, but everybody played a role in that. And I think that's the dopest part about it.
College football tees, college basketball tees, whatever you need, Mercury has you covered with the best merch out there. We're talking about high quality clothing, inexpensive, and the best part is I have a 15% discount for everybody who goes and gets some right now. Use the code below, hit the link in the description, and go get your merch now. Use the code to get 15% off. What are you waiting on? Go do it.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Lion's Den. This week we're virtual, week 1 of spring ball. My guys are locked in this week, but we are joined by none other than the legendary Christian Hackenberg, fresh off of putting his son down for bed. So Hack, 2 questions for you. Number 1, how old is your son? Number 2, how many times a week do you already have him throwing the football?
He'll be 11 months tomorrow. So that's been a blast. And yeah, he's got these eggs now. My mother-in-law got him like a dozen of these like eggs. They have shapes on the inside and they like connect or whatever. So he's finally getting to that point where he can toss those around a little bit and like, he spikes them. He doesn't throw them, but he spikes them. So every time I do that, I get a little excited. But I'm not trying to Todd Marinovich the kid now. So we're gonna let him figure it out. But it's the best thing ever, man. It's so much fun, and he's cruising right along. So.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mentioned it earlier already. Spring ball is rolling, Hack. Nick Dawkins, Jerry Cross, my guys are locked in. Doc is in a position to go compete to win that starting center job. I think spring ball is a little bit different for every position. I think it's very circumstantial, depending on whether or not your coach departed or not, what transfers you bring in. But I want to ask you specifically about the quarterback position. So much is going to be made of Drew Allar's development, Bo Prabula right behind him. What is it about spring ball that is so important for quarterbacks?
Listen, spring ball is it's accumulation of the offseason, right? And I think the quarterback position specifically, I think you can attest to this, having been in many locker rooms in your career, is different. It transcends just that room. It transcends the locker room oftentimes. And spring ball is more so about carrying that momentum from winter workouts onto the field. And then for Drew, I think it's a great opportunity for him to focus on the things that he needs to get better at, what he wants to improve on. He's got a new offense. So spring ball is really about reps, continuing that momentum and being a driver and kind of taking that holistic approach to it, and making sure that the expectations are set where they need to be in order to reach the goals that the team has. And you have a very powerful position to be able to do that every day. And then, for Drew, like I said, introspectively looking at it, it's a great time to get reps, try things, test things out, because you're getting a lot of good versus good action. And I talk about this with Brandon Bell. It's something Bill O'Brien did with us during the season, even with our shorter roster, where we went good versus good during the season, because oftentimes when you get the cards and all that stuff, it's, they're telling the walk-on kid to bite on something and he's biting 5-6 yards. That's never going to happen that when the lights come on, So it's really a good opportunity to take some mental reps from last year, some mental notes, and start seeing, hey, is he flat-footed? If he's flat-footed, then I could take this shot. Or if he does this, so you can really start testing those little things and focusing on the finer details of recognition. And I think that's where his growth needs to be. Without diving too far into it, It's just being more and more accurate and more on time with those deeper progressing routes and the things down the field. He either hit it or he missed by a pretty wide margin relatively consistently. 20 yards and under, he distributes the ball very, very well on time, plays on time. And I keep telling people this and they don't understand it. Like, he takes checkdowns. That's incredibly mature for his age. Like, I never learned how to take a check down. And that's part of the reason why I was on the couch quickly. Like, I always was trying to get the bigger fish, and being able to teach a kid to take shots and see things is a lot easier than trying to reel them in. So I know that's super long winded, but spring ball for me, and specifically that quarterback room and Drew, is going to be unique. And I'll rattle off on this too. Like with Bo, it's a great chance to start pushing. You know what I mean? And pushing for reps. Andy's shown the propensity to roll two guys out there, have different packages. We did it last year, so we know that that's definitely in our holster and in our deck of cards. So it's a great opportunity for Bo to push and compete. And iron only sharpens iron, brother. So I'm really locked in. I said this was going to be a competition for me to watch during spring ball, but it's not necessarily a competition. I'm just curious to see how the alpha mentalities that often come with that position push each other in the right way, which ultimately will help rise the rest of the guys' play and focus and attention to detail. So it's an exciting time to watch that position as a Penn State fan.
Yeah, I think you bring up a couple good points. The one thing I wanted to speak to before we get into the other things that you said, you talk about momentum from winter workouts into spring ball. It's a long off season, man. It's a really long off season until you go through a Penn State football off season under the man named James Franklin. It's hard to understand how long it can be. And I think so much about the off seasons that Coach Franklin tries to put together are about culture, and they're about attitude and how you grind and how you go about things as a team. And that's one of the cooler parts of the off season to me. To get back to, again, another point you made, you do bring in a new offensive coordinator. Everybody's talking about it. Very few have had to play under multiple offensive coordinators at the quarterback spot specifically. What does it take for this offense to continue to move forward, learn this offense, and then to be able to go implement it? And is it possible for it to be clicking on all cylinders heading into the season?
Yeah, I definitely think it's possible. And I think ultimately it comes down to how Andy approaches it, right? Like, you're not going to have a super mature offense by the time the season rolls in terms of like getting in depth and being able to self-scout and being able to figure things out. But I have heard him talk, and a couple of the things I really love that he's talking about is teaching and finding out what his players do well. And those are things that I've always harped on. And I feel like football gets overcomplicated oftentimes at all levels by a lot of coaches by trying to just be too cute or be too sexy and try to get this new wave thing in there and try to coach to looks. He seems to be a very fundamentally oriented coach. He seems to be a coach and a coordinator that wants to put his guys in positions to be successful consistently. And really, the spring is going to be about him learning that and being able to implement the foundation of what he wants to then build off of throughout training camp and then throughout the season as the season evolves and things happen. We know injuries happen, momentum happens, a guy gets hot, a guy gets cold. So being able to adjust and adapt within the season, but having a very, very solid foundation to fall back on that everybody in your 2 or 3 deep who's going to be getting reps knows exactly how to execute it against anything they're going to see. And it's like your binky. You can go back to it. You can move the football. You can be efficient if shit hits the fan. So I think that's really what how he's going to approach spring ball. He's going to find out what he's doing, install his foundation, and then work to build that. So for me, that's enough to win a lot of football games if you got the talent that we have. When you're trying to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, you often get lost and there's no real identity and there's no foundation. And that's when it's frustrating to watch offenses, when you see them struggling to find out who they are and how they want to attack things. You're the offense. You're on the offensive. You get to set the tempo and you get to dictate the terms. And fortunately, we have a lot of pieces, not just at the quarterback position, but the running backs, the tight ends who can really dictate terms very consistently at this level.
Yeah, you talk about talent. So much focus when a new coordinator comes in goes on to the players doing the learning on their end. And really, the truth of the matter is the good coaches are doing just as much learning. You got to find out who your horses are, what works best for your offense with the talent that's in-house. We'll go around the offense. Obviously, you bring in Julian Fleming from Ohio State. You get Tyler Warren. You get Nick Singleton and Katron Allen back. There are some solid pieces on the board for Penn State's offense that you know what you're going to get. My question to you is, after evaluating the offense last season, what one or two areas do you look at this 2024 offense and say, hey, these are the spots that we got to see the most improvement for us to go be elite?
Yeah, I think the one thing people brought up was the offensive line play. I thought they played great. Now, I think that there's another gear there. There's another element of strain for portions of it. And, you go back to it. Why wasn't Nick and Katron as explosive as they were the year before? And I think it's just one of those things. It could have been them banged up, like, who knows? But I think the offensive line can take onus on that and say, hey, we're going to strain for that half a second longer on my block. We're going to climb and make sure we really clean things up at the second level, because that's effort and attitude, right? The talent's there. That's one of the areas where I think that can always improve. And that's not like nitpicking. That's just saying, like, if I'm going to say what we need to improve on foundationally, it's physicality at the line of scrimmage, getting to the second level, getting hats on hats, and creating even more space. So there is no doubt in that portion of our offense. And then secondly, I think it's just an alpha emerging in the receiver room. And you mentioned Julian Fleming coming. He's dealt with several alphas at his time up at Ohio State. Some really, really good players. So I hope that he brings a sense of urgency to that room, because I said this all year too, extremely talented room. It's not like we didn't have the guys. I just want to see somebody emerge as that guy who says, on 3rd and 8, I want the ball every time, because it doesn't matter what they're doing. I'm going to win 10 times out of 10, and play with that. And again, I think a lot of that goes to the system and the belief in the system and being able to put them in positions to be successful, whether it's, hey, I'm not going to run by this corner 10 times out of 10, but I'm a really crafty route runner, and you can motion me in and get me matched up on a safety or a linebacker and start taking advantage of those types of things in zone coverage or man coverage or whatever. So I'm really intrigued to see who's gonna step up in that room, because it's bound to happen. It needs to happen. And I think I got a lot of respect for Coach Higgins. He's known. I watched Biscuit play when he was little. My dad played at Virginia. I grew up in the Charlottesville area, so like I'm pulling for him. I think he's got a really good approach to it, and he's going to get the best out of those guys this offseason. So.
Yeah, great points. I think there's plenty of talent in the receiver room. And not only that, I'm sure that unit, more so than anybody on the team, feels the disrespect from the outside. And I'm sure that's nothing but motivation. Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt about it. I want to ask you another question. The spring game. Okay. Again, something that from the outside looking in has a lot of grand allure to it. Okay. It's very big. A lot of people come back for it, especially at Penn State. It's a big deal for the fans. They enjoy it. They get eyes on people that maybe they haven't seen before. Now, I will say, as a former player, my perspective on the spring game and how I feel about the spring game as a player might be different than what fans think. I know for myself personally, for most of my career, by the time the spring game came, I was just ready to be done. As far as offensive and defensive line play is concerned, if you're physical on a Tuesday in Haluba Hall, then you're probably physical in Beaver Stadium as well. Not quite as important as a quarterback. When people come in at the end of the month and they watch Drew and Bo and Jackson Smolik and the gang throw the football, how much onus should be put on the performance that they see?
Listen up. Are you paying too much for health insurance? Are you tired of reading these long, extensive policies the health insurance companies put out? Meet Patrick Mowdy of Mowdy Health. He's a Penn State letterman. Patrick leverages years of experience to offer customized insurance solutions. Those solutions help you develop a coverage game plan to cover the safety and well-being of you and your family. Mowdy Health. One broker. Endless solutions.
Yeah, I think no matter how much we try to say this, it needs to be taken for a grain of salt. I approached the spring game, and as I matured through my career, my short career in the NFL was like an off season or a preseason game. Like, you want it to just be clean. You want to execute. You don't want to hang on to the football. You want to distribute it, facilitate, and just make things look crisp, because that's what it is. It's a show. You're trying to see oftentimes, development, depth development. You're trying to see who, is maybe going to be that 2 or that 3, because oftentimes, like you said, the meat of spring ball kind of dictates who's going to be who heading into training camp. And the fans don't really get to see that. It's going to be more so about get them some touches, let them get some TV time, and then really start distributing, facilitating, letting guys get the opportunity to make some plays and potentially move themselves up the depth chart heading into training camp. So that's how I always viewed the spring game. It was like, I walked into it knowing what my role was going to be come August. So it was very much so about how can I distribute the football and get some guys some confidence. How can I, maybe help someone make a play here or there that could give them a chance heading into training camp. So, for Drew, I think it's just going to be make it look as clean as possible, facilitate, efficient, complete the football, and just really button it up and get it moving. Like move on. You know what I mean? At least as a player, that's my thing is check the box and get ready for the summer, for the round of summer conditioning heading into training camp.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Get guys out there, execute cleanly, stay healthy, and get ready for summer ball and start dialing up for camp. I think that's what it's all about. I do want to ask you, this is my last quarterback question, then we'll move to some different topics here. As far as James Franklin and Drew Allar's relationship, everybody's going to talk about Drew needing to continue to develop and continuing to need to get better. But what can James Franklin, the head football coach of the Penn State Nittany Lions, do to help Drew get from point A to point B?
Yeah, I think coach plays a massive role. And I think also Andy's going to play a really big role. And then retaining Danny O'Brien's been big. It just seems like that was a good relationship that Drew had and somebody he trusted. And that's one thing I will say. I think coach has been pretty consistent with it. He delegates that relationship to that person, and in terms of the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator, very well. But I would like to see him step out of his comfort zone, I think, at times and grab him. And I think Drew's very receptive to that. And I think it can be powerful. For me, does he have to do it? Absolutely not. I think he's got the right pieces in place in terms of who he hired and what they need to do to get it done. And Drew's also got to be the guy that's going to be receptive to it and take those strides and try to get on that page. So I think it's a two-way street there. And I think Coach Franklin has shown the propensity to do it in the past. And I think he's going to be strategic with it, but I think he's really going to rely on his hires to get the job done, because those are the guys who are teaching it, preaching it, who they're answering to in meeting rooms. And I think that's how Coach really likes to run it. And I think that's a very fair way to do it. It's been proven across the country. And, I think him and Drew are going to continue to get closer as these bigger games come up now too, with the meat of the schedule shifting and getting some bigger programs with some more brass, Washington and SC and so on and so forth. Like, I think those bigger games and those more heated moments are going to really create some cohesiveness between the head guy and the quarterback.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition to my next question. You bring up the meat of the schedule. There's a 5-game stretch there that I was looking at. That to me, we're going to find a lot out about Penn State football. When you look at the new additions that are coming to the Big Ten, which of those teams do you look at and think to yourself, they may be able to go compete for a title in their first year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be tough to discredit Washington. I don't think you get to where Washington got to with 2 or 3. Michael Penix Jr. was a phenomenal player. Their receiving room was phenomenal. I know they have to replace some pieces there, but you don't get to that point without having developed depth within that roster. And I know the transfer portal, I'm not too privy to who's moved and what, but they hired Jed Fish. I got a ton of respect for Jed Fish. What he did at Arizona the past few years has been nothing short of spectacular, especially with all of the poaching and craziness going on in college football. So I think they're not going to be too far off from a skip the beat. I think they're going to be tough. They're going to bring that type of mentality that I think the Pac-12 isn't necessarily known for. I think they're probably the quickest transition in terms of physicality on both sides of the ball and at the line of scrimmage. So I think that they're going to be a dark horse in terms of being able to bring some juice when no one I think is really expecting it. And then SC, Lincoln's going to do what Lincoln's going to do. He's going to have a guy who can pull the trigger. He's going to have some flair. He's going to present some issues for defenses, no matter who you are. So you're going to have to match up Jimmys and Joes with them. Fortunately, I think for our sake, we've done that very well on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm curious to see the transition, but those programs are big. And then Dan Lanning's, I think, the closest from the Pac-12 in terms of bridging that gap and getting over that hump. The way that he's doing it, he's, you got to look back at his lineage, under Saban, under Kirby, two of now the godfathers. If you were to put a dark lit table in the back of an Italian restaurant with some cigars rolling, those two guys would be the forefronts of that, would be at the forefront of those tables. So Dan's bringing a lot of juice. I love the way that he approaches building a program, and I think Oregon's got some scary hours in there up their sleeve.
No doubt. No, there's some serious talent that's going to come along with those squads. I agree with your point, everybody's point. The question in the air is, can they compete with the physicality of the Big Ten? Yeah. I think if Penn State football is equipped in one area specifically for these teams to join, it's on the defensive side of the football, and that side is going to have to play well. But another point, and you bring up the several head coaches who are coming over in this transition, the thing that's concerning to me is that there's some real deal ball coaches coming to the Big Ten. You look top to the bottom at a lot of these squads, from Rutgers to Oregon to whoever. Penn State is going to play against some really good football coaches that are going to scheme some things up and make it competitive.
I've said this even last year. When you look at the Big Ten head coach to head coach, even with the SEC, I'd put it up there with any of them. I mean, Bielema at Illinois. I think Ruley's going to get Nebraska going. He's a hell of a football coach. So there's depth even at those like sneaky places that people just overlook oftentimes. And to your point, adding some of those guys into the mix, it's going to be a dog eat dog world. And to your point, a focus on football and being able to scheme and adjust and do it efficiently and quickly is going to become a major asset to any program that's playing in the Big Ten. And I think that's great for football fans. I think it's great for the conference. But everybody's got to be equipped to do that. And, I think we're well on our way and rolling with our hires. So I'm excited to see what happens when the cleats hit the grass.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. One coach I'll speak to specifically, whom I've seen turn a program around in little to no time, is Wisconsin's head coach, Luke Fickell. Yep. And the way he's turned the University of Cincinnati around, built them up into a playoff contender quickly. At some point, the Wisconsin Badgers are going to start looking like the Wisconsin Badgers again. So I just think the Big Ten is exciting times if you're a fan of it. If you enjoy the football, there's some battles coming down the pipe. And I think this conference is going to be the best in college football.
That's a great point, dude. I completely overlooked Fickell.
And
that's the crazy part is like you overlook a guy like that when you're just talking about it. It's deep, bro.
Deep, super deep. I want to transition here a little bit. I would be remiss if we had you on the show and we didn't ask Christian Hackenberg some questions about his experience as a player, both at the college and the NFL level. So I'm going to start off hot, Hack. We're going to start off real hot. I'm going to ask you which win you hold nearer to your heart. Which one means more? Michigan whiteout, which I'm sure you expected, or that Pinstripe Bowl game fresh off of the sanctions?
Man. I think just for the bigger meaning, the Pinstripe Bowl, what that locker room went through, like everyone tries to cover it, but you really don't know like all of it, and no one ever will. And that's the cool part about it. And like, I've talked about this, the way that Coach Franklin and Bill and everyone played their role, and to where this program is now, like, I thought that was a big point in terms of getting the ship steered in the right direction and just keeping it afloat when there was a lot of problems going on internally that people overlook. I mean, just youth and depth issues and those scholarships. I mean, the NCAA damn near tried to give us the death penalty. I don't think it was like a thing or even on the table at that point in time, just because it's so severe. But, they tried everything. And that was just cool to be able to come out there with those guys. Like, everyone was through it. 2012 commits to 13 in my class. Like, that was a cool accumulation. And that's not to say the Michigan game was not fantastic. It was spectacular. But just the bigger picture was the Pinstripe Bowl.
Yeah. So I guess off of that, then you bring up all the sanctions, all the hardship, well documented. Everybody knows about them. What led to Christian Hackenberg's decision to choose Penn State? Knowing of all the things that had gone on, how did you decide that Penn State was the right choice for you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was pretty simple. My high school coach was a very rough around the edges prick, but I love him to death. And Fort Union Military Academy has its own kind of aura about it and rap within the college game and coaches. So Mickey had been there for 40 years, coach guys like Eddie George, Chris Perry, very long list of guys that played and were very successful. So he approached all of us the same, made you write a list out, academics, athletics, and then social life, and compare apples to apples as you went through the process. And like, people talk about the whole number one ranking and all that shit coming out. Like, I didn't even want that. Didn't know about it. Didn't ask about it. It just kind of came. And like, Fort Union was awesome because it was like this little bubble. So when I was going through the process, I pretty much shaved it down to like what I wanted out of a program. And Coach O'Brien was there just coming off the Patriots and coaching Tom Brady. And it was just like, my mind was so focused on playing in the NFL because it's what I wanted to do since I touched a football. So I just thought, no matter what the circumstances were around that, if I had that guy there, I would be able to develop the proper way because of who he's coached and been around. So that was a major factor. And then subsequently, like, as I was there for a year and Coach Franklin came in and all the turnover and like, you could leave and all that stuff, like, it became so much bigger than that. Like, it was, I'm 18 years old and I got like the weight of the program on my shoulders and I have to shoulder the brunt. And I've been doing it since I was 16. So it was like, I kind of felt like I was a bitch if I left at that point, So it became more of like a, not a martyr, but like a moral side of things, as it developed. So it kind of had two stages, but it was great. And I've said it over and over again, wouldn't change it for the world. It's opened up so many doors and, shaped me as a man more so than anything. And I think that's the coolest part about football. Like, everyone's journey is different. The journey is what it is, but sports is the greatest teacher of life, and football specifically is the greatest team sport ever created, and also the greatest teacher of life out of all the sports. So, a very unique, tough experience at a very early age is boded well for me, outside of football, which is the biggest and most important thing there is.
Yeah, you bring up a ton of good points. Number one, you're right. Football, college football, Penn State football. Yeah. If you're going to do one thing, you're going to learn how to swim. You're going to learn how to be a man and go about your business and handle adversity. And I do think that's one of the huge positives. You spoke to the transition from Bill O'Brien to Coach Franklin, which obviously for any quarterback is a big deal. But to have gone through that at a young age, can you speak to some of the adversity that came with that, as well as how you were able to find a way to fight through it and continue on with your career?
Yeah, it was so seismic, not just for me, but I think the entire locker room, because of the way that Bill handled things and Coach Franklin handled things. Similar in some ways, but very different in a lot of ways. And that difference, coupled with the circumstances, made it very harsh in a lot of ways. And I heard Coach talk about it too when Adam interviewed him. Like, he wishes he spent more time with the locker room. I think the locker room felt that way. I think the locker room wishes they did more things to like try to get him to do that. So like, hindsight's always 20/20, bro. But it was just different. And I've always said that, like, that's the easiest way to explain it. And there was so much other shit going on, like administration, turnover, alignment there, that ultimately leads to a successful program that Coach had to deal with. So it was like everyone was juggling a lot of balls and everyone was wearing a lot of different hats. And for me, like, that's kind of what my last 2 years at Penn State was about. Like, I didn't have a ton of time to like focus on me and my development. I kind of just had to do what I had to do and help patch the gaps and get it going. And I think a lot of us were doing that. And that's what I think is so spectacular about the whole thing, is that never had a losing season in that entire stretch. Did it wear me down mentally? 1,000%. Did it affect the long term? Probably, from a football standpoint, 1,000%. But again, just being able to do it at a place like that and then reap the benefits as a letterman and alumni now, and guys like you now coming out, like, the character of guys hasn't changed, the drive of guys haven't changed, and the seismic drop that everyone expected from the program never happened. Right. And not just me, but everybody played a role in that. And I think that's the dopest part about it. And the change was very different and harsh for the locker room, but good in terms of getting the program to the next phase of being a national championship contender.
Listen up. Are you paying too much for health insurance? Are you tired of reading these long, extensive policies the health insurance companies put out? Meet Patrick Mowdy of Mowdy Health. He's a Penn State letterman. Patrick leverages years of experience to offer customized insurance solutions. Those solutions help you develop a coverage game plan to cover the safety and well-being of you and your family. Mowdy Health. One broker. Endless solutions.
No doubt about it. And I think it's so cool. I don't think there are a lot of places, if any, that could go through the turmoil that Penn State football went through, have a core group of guys like yourself and that group that you played with that kind of put the program on your back, and carry it to the next phase, to the Coach Franklin era. And obviously they've been able to accomplish some impressive things since then. It doesn't happen like that everywhere. Everywhere's culture is not that strong. The tradition is not that strong. And that would have been enough at a lot of places. I want to go back to something you said where you were like, there were multiple phases to your decision to be at Penn State and to stay at Penn State. And one of them that I thought was funny that you brought up was, again, at one point you're like, I can't look like a coward. I can't back off of this now. Now, you and I obviously had very different careers. I was never Christian Hackenberg at Penn State, but I do remember being on the scout team going into my third year and knowing internally, hey, if I want to play college football, it's probably time to go somewhere else and do it. But on the inside, I'm like, I cannot give people back home the satisfaction of me bailing off this Penn State decision. So much goes into the decision to stay, come and go, the modern era of college football.
Oh, for sure, dude. And it's like, it's funny. And like, certain kids aren't made that way. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but like, I have a ton of respect for people who say something and like finish the mission, whatever that mission is. Like, Charlie Mike that son of a gun and get it over the finish line and pass it. Like, that was kind of the way I was raised. It's kind of what I got into. And like, my dad and I almost got in a fist fight in my cousin's garage over it. And he's like, you got to get up out of there. And I'm like, dude, like, I can't. And he's like, well, yeah, I guess I kind of raised you to be that way. And I'm like, yeah, like, if I do it, like, it's just, just can't.
No doubt about it. Raised differently, man. You brought up, again, just all the things that kind of came with that transition and things being different, feeling the weight of the program on your shoulders as just a young guy. So I'm going to ask you now, as Christian Hackenberg, the father and husband, if you could write a letter to your younger self, going through what you were going through, what are some of the things that you would say? Yeah,
I mean, it's tough, dude, because like I said, I wouldn't change it. Like, it was what it was. I just wish I would have handled it differently in the sense of like, because I'm like, I call myself an introverted extrovert. Like, if I like you and I know you and I trust you, I'll spill all the beans. You'll have the whole Christian. But not many people have that key to that door. So I oftentimes would like disconnect myself. I didn't get help when I probably needed help in certain ways. I didn't lean on things. So like doing that earlier, I think would have been better for me and beneficial for me long-term, specifically in football. Yeah. And that's kind of the selfish side of things that I wish I would have done more rather than just close off and go in a shell and, you know, win, lose, or draw. I'm sitting at the house by myself, sending guys out, you know, hanging out for a little bit, but not wanting to do any of that. That was tough. So that was probably the only thing that I would change is just like go get help. You know what I mean? Like go get help in some way, shape, or form and figure out a way how to, because it wasn't necessarily, I mean, physically I did, you know, take some beatings here and there, but it was more so the mental side of things. And like that battery life, if it's constant, drains a whole hell of a lot faster than your physical side. And that's ultimately, I think, what happened.
Yeah. And I think that's, in some ways, a common experience in college football for a lot of guys I know is just kind of going through some of the mental aspects of the adversity they get hit with. They probably realize they should go get some help, but everything that's inside of them and wires them to be the big, tough football player that they are kind of can prohibit going out and seeking that as a young person. It's just not very common that you see people who get to that position go out and do. And I think that it's a good point. It's something that's not just Penn State, but it's all around the country.
All different aspects of it too. And that's like that's the one thing I talk to, like even my brothers, like I got, you know, my one brother just got done playing professional soccer, but I got two younger brothers that are playing professional baseball. So like just talking them through that grind and that transition. And fortunately they didn't really have the same, my youngest brother kind of did, but the same career path and trajectory as it pertains to like visibility and stuff like that. So like my little brother Adam's just built different mentally in a lot of ways. So like he just plugs along. He's kind of a machine like that. But like being able to still help them and guide them through that and be a resource now is like way more fulfilling than if I ever like figured it out and did what I should have done and could have done and was capable of doing. Like being able to then help my family first and then anybody else that comes along and explain the importance of that. Like there's so much that I thought it was just handle business on the field. And like, to your point, you know, big, tough guy, don't need to nurture other parts of my body and my physical makeup. And I did. And that's, you know, like I said, hindsight's always 20/20, but you live, you learn, you grow, and ultimately you make an impact elsewhere. And that's kind of where I've shifted my focus with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to shift the focus here, and we'll kind of wrap this up after these next couple questions. But we obviously just wrapped up the combine. Free agency is in full swing at this point of the week. And obviously there are a bunch of Penn State guys who are getting ready to go into the NFL and into their rookie season. So I'm going to ask you, Christian Hackenberg, when you were a rookie in the league, what was the most surprising part of that transition that maybe you wouldn't have expected?
Yeah, I think it's a long year, first off, because you like you said, you go into draft prep and then you hit the combine, then you hit the pro day, then you get drafted or you sign, and then you're straight into OTAs, and then you have like a month to breathe, and then training camp and the longest football season you've ever been a part of, and potentially even getting longer. So that's probably one of the toughest parts, is just mentally being able to stay focused for that long, and then also adjust to the game that the NFL game is. It's Jordan Palmer, who I trained with, told me this, and it clicked about halfway through training camp my rookie year with me, was the game's like this much faster, right? Like it's the best of the best. It's a little faster, you know, whatever. You can make a good athlete makes that adjustment. The game is like this much more intellectual, and the guys are this much more smart when it comes to how they recognize things and stuff like that. So that was the jump on top of just the mental grind. Was like, I played with Darrelle Revis my rookie year, and I tell this story. I was running scout team, he was playing cover 2 on the backside. It was a clean as day cover 2 look. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to just drop back, stare the front side down, and rip this in cut over the Will's head. Drop back, playing out perfect in my brain. I turn, I throw the ball, and like Reeve is playing 2-man trail tech underneath him and picks it off. And I went up to him after practice. I was like, Reeve, what were you doing in trail tech? He goes, listen, bro, it was 3x1. The kid took this release. I knew I had help over the top. I knew you didn't have anyone getting into the flat because we were, he was going to be caught up in protection. And if it was a back, I could rally to it. So I just played trail tech and stayed on his back hip. And, it's what happened. All proud, Hall of Famer. And he just kind of explained it away like that. But like, that's the transition. You got guys like that. You got guys like Ed Reed, like what's played by the book and what's coached at the college level. And guys are like, oh, like quarters, I got to be here and I got to, here to here and do this. Like they're not. They're so instinctual. They're pros. They've seen it a gazillion times. So like that's the biggest jump. And I think a lot of these guys are gonna feel that. Obviously, it's magnified at the quarterback position because it's like everywhere. But that was definitely it for me.
Yeah. No, I think you're right on the money. Just knowing the guys that I've known that played in the NFL, that's what they say. It's just everybody has so much more awareness and intelligence about everything that's going on around them. They're pros. If you haven't, go ahead.
I said they're just savvy.
It's a different level to it. And if you haven't sat down and watched a pro break down some film and explain, just like Darrelle Revis explained to you why he played that trail technique there, you don't really realize the jump that it really is in terms of just understanding of entire concepts and formations and alignments and where they are on the field and all of those things that come along with being a pro. The next question I want to ask you, and I was giving this some thought myself, so I'm interested in your answer. Outside of Olu Fashanu, outside of Trop Robinson, when you look at the rest of this draft class, from Theo Johnson to Kurt Jacobs or whoever you want to name, is there one prospect in particular that you think is going to go find a ton of success in the NFL? If you had to name one.
I think it's Theo.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he played in a very loaded room. A lot of the opportunity went to Tyler in terms of the stats and the eyeballs. But when you look at his build, you look at the way he plays, he can play in line. He can do a lot of things. He's got a ton of reps on special teams, which is going to be valuable to making a roster, especially as a young guy. So, like, I think a guy like that in the right system, and that's the other thing. The NFL is a lot about getting into a good position and a good situation and being able to take advantage of the opportunity, some more, some less. And I think Theo's got an opportunity to do it because he's hungry. He probably wants to prove that he could be that guy. And I think his game can fit in well with a few of the teams that would be looking for somebody like him, where I think he's going to end up being slotted. And obviously physical freak, combine numbers, whatever, but I'm just talking when you turn on the tape and you look at what he's done and how he does it, I think he's got a chance. There's a few other guys, but he's the one who I'm like super bullish on.
Yeah, and another point with that is just, again, the depth of the room. He had Pat Freiermuth. He had Brenton Strange. He played with Tyler Warren. All the tight ends that have played since 2018, really before that with Gesicki and the gang, they've all been NFL guys. There's a standard in that room. You're indulged in it on day one when you're a freshman on campus. I played with Theo for 3 years. I want to say 2-3 years. The kid is always doing the right things. He's always busting his tail. He can do it all, from being a great athlete to putting his hand in the dirt and blocking if he has to. You mentioned the special teams experience. I can see Theo balling. I will give you an answer from the flip side of the field, a guy that I think is still being a little bit slept on, and that's Adissa Issac. He never really was fully healthy at Penn State. Yeah. Last season was the first time we saw him as a healthy product. He was on the field. He played all season long, and he had a ton of production from TFLs to even in pass rush finding some success. I think you're just going to see him continuing to get better with time. I remember when he was a true freshman, he was an early enrollee. He was literally 17 years old and was dominating 24-year-old tackles. Nobody could do anything with him. Just a freak.
He's a physical, and the cool thing about him is like the raw talent and, like you said, those intangible things at the NFL level when it comes to defensive schemes. he can do so much.
Yeah.
Like, you can stand him up. You can make him a rusher. He can probably play in space and drop. Like, he can do so much because when I was with New York, Todd Bowles was our head coach. So, like, he did a lot with guys like that he was a base 3-4, but sometimes you get in 4-down alignment with 3-4 personnel. And, like, when you have a bunch of athletes, like, you can start bastardizing shit like that and make it harder for the offense. And he's a piece that people want to get their hands on because of the flexibility and the malleability, to your point.
Yep.
Not really healthy, not kind of like just a ball of clay. And, like, if you get the right system and the right coach and the right thing, like, can mold him into a very, very productive player at that level. And that's an awesome point on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, I'm an offensive guy, so, my choice is going to be there. But
I'd expect nothing less from you. The last thing I'll say about Adissa that I think is going to serve him well in the league, you mentioned being able to do a ton of different things. The defensive ends at Penn State, and this is true from Brent Pry to Manny Diaz, and I'm sure Tom Allen will be similar. The defensive ends are asked to do so much and understand so much of the defense. There's so many blitzes that we call where one of our ends will drop underneath a wide receiver. We'll have him peel off with backs and play man all the way down the field. Adissa Issac, the thing that was special about him as a young guy was not just his physical ability. It was the fact that he was 17 and was picking up the deepest and most advanced intricacies of the defense very young. He's a playbook guy. He's going to be a culture guy, do everything the right way. I'm rooting for my dog Adissa as well as the rest of the Nittany Lions get ready for the draft. And that's it. Hack, I appreciate you joining me today on The Den. For the viewers back home, if you haven't already, if you're living under a rock, go check out Hack and B Bell's podcast. Do you guys have a social media page yourself, or are you under the state media umbrella, Hack?
We might. It's The Pocket, I think. I got to look at it. I'm not a big, social media guy. I leave that to the team. Yeah, I'm sure it's probably out there.
No doubt. Well, either way, go listen to The Pocket if you haven't already. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Lions Den. Stay tuned for future episodes and the best Penn State football content on the planet at State Media. And if you haven't got the merch yet, after all these episodes, hit the link in the description below and go get a hoodie in honor of your boy. Hack, appreciate you, brother.
Hey, bro. I appreciate it. It's actually good to be on this side of it now, just answering questions and not having to craft it. So hats off to you, and I appreciate it, dude.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a good one.